Hello, Gwen. How are you doing today?
I am fabulous. Thank you for having me on, Ash. I appreciate it.
Great stuff. You're always welcome. I've been so excited to have you on my show since we had our intro call, and I've been thinking about like, okay, what sort of question I'm going to ask Gwen because there's a plethora of knowledge there to bring on the show, right? So before we go into the show, Gwen, do you have a favorite quote, something that inspires you, motivates you, you would like to share with our audience?
It's a long quote, so I'm not going to give the whole quote. Everyone has heard this, but it's about don't dim your light, shine your
Mm-hmm.
brightness out there, and be all that you are designed to be. And I think it's something that we all need to hear because at some point someone tells us, "Oh, you're too much." Especially when you're a founder, an entrepreneur, a visionary. And so I love remembering, shine your whole brightness, all that you are, all that comes with you. The world needs it, and your unique combination of it is particularly valuable.
Indeed, indeed. Couldn't agree more with you on this because my grandmother, she's still alive, by the way. She used to say when I was a kid that there is nobody on this earth which is like you. You have your own energy, your own. She didn't use the word light, but she used to use a lot of energy word, and there is nothing which could replace your energy. So be proud of her. She always used to, say that. So I remembered that when you mentioned the quote. Okay, Gwen, let's do. So I was thinking today on the show we should do something different. Imagine that we are in a room of full of ambitious founders, early stage builders, people who are like crazy about, creating something of their own. They are gathered in a room. The room is empty. The room is full of founders, but the stage is empty. And then you walk in the room with the mic on your hand and the spotlight is on you. You walk on the stage and everybody's looking at you and saying, who is this lady? Who is this gorgeous lady walking on the stage? What is she going to say? But they don't know you. They haven't seen you before. What would you tell them that will keep them with us for the rest of the hour?
So I would share a story. I would start by saying um, everybody has untapped potential, but the trick to untapped potential is, in fact, tapping it. And part of it being untapped is if we could do it ourselves, we would have. So I want to share a story of one of my early clients who is still a client. So we've been working together for years now. And when we first started working together, she had had her business not too long. I want to say a year or two. It was still a fairly new business. So much like this hypothetical audience that you're talking about, and she had had some success. She was in the early stages of a six figure business, and um, she knew there was more in her, that she could do more. And so we started working together. And what I did with her is I did what I call business advisory. I focused on three really big things. The first was keeping her focused.
Mm,
Because as a visionary and an entrepreneur, it is so easy to get distracted by, all the things all the time, right? And she was absolutely, and she has a brilliant ideas, lots and lots of brilliant ideas. So it's never about, whether or not they're a good idea. That's not the issue. There's too many good
mm.
ideas, right? So the first was keeping her focused. And early in our work together, I had her make a Post-it note that she was to put on her computer that said, "No new ideas." No new ideas,
New
so that we
ideas.
could get focused on the things that she was doing. The
Mm,
other thing that I did was I pushed back and I would ask her questions that no one else was willing sometimes even able, but often willing to ask because she was brilliant. She was doing all sorts of the right things, like so many founders do. And
Mm,
anyone that was working with her was like, well, she knows what she's doing. She's totally, why would I question it? And so part of what my job was questioning her on everything. And I remember the first time I really pushed what I'm going to call a button of hers. I didn't realize I was pushing a button at the time,
mhm, mm,
but I asked her a question, and she's delightful. She's friendly and open, and she always has this great smile. And her face went blank. It went so blank. And the thing we now joke about it, we call it the resting serial killer face. When she gets this when she gets this face, right? And I honestly thought I was gonna get fired. I thought our engagement is now done
mm,
because
mm,
I have pushed too far. But the reality was the second that I did that, she had to process it because no one had really pushed her that way. And within 24 hours, I was getting responses to the question that I had asked.
mm,
That it was like, "Oh, and I thought of this, and I thought of this, and I thought of that." So, needless to say, we did not get fired. But the third thing, and probably the most important thing that I did, was I kept holding her truly accountable. And when I mean accountable, I don't mean managing her tasks. That is,
mm,
she's an adult, she can handle that. But accountability that includes reflection, that is all about problem solving, is really looking at what's in the way and how do we get past that
mm,
and move
mm.
forward. And what happened in this relationship, like I said, she was in her early six figures when we first started. Within 2 years, she was doing $3 million a year in her
Wow,
business.
wow.
Many of these things were things that were based on questions that I had asked. Now, she did the work.
Mm,
This was within her capabilities. So she was totally capable of doing it. And literally last night, I got a text from her that said, I am on track for $1 million month.
there you go.
Two
There you
two
go.
years later, we're looking at, a $12 million business. So,
Amazing, amazing.
right? And back to, it wasn't me doing the work. She had that capability within her, but the work together allowed it to come out.
Mm, mm. And the key part here is the accountability part because you made sure that she was accountable. And as we progress in our show, Gwen, I wanted to emphasize on this because you always talk about accountability and what
I
everybody
do.
gets wrong about accountability, things like that. In your experience, where do teams or even solo founders misinterpret what accountability actually requires from them?
Well, so often now accountability has been associated with task management. Did you do it or
Mm,
did you not do it? And that is an element, but it's the tiniest little element of accountability. We need to know, is it getting done or is it not getting done, right? So, but that's kind of become the whole thing of accountability. The other thing that happens so often is people assume that holding people accountable is the same as micromanaging them. And no one wants to be micromanaged. And founders never want to micromanage because that is like so not in their zone of genius at all, right? Um, but they associate accountability with micromanagement, which it is not.
mm,
Accountability really is about looking at what is and isn't getting done, and then reflecting on both the things that are getting done and the things that are not getting done. Are we
mm,
actually doing the right things if we're getting them done? If we're not getting them done, what's actually holding us back from getting it
mm,
done? Instead of just doing shaming, because a lot of times people associate accountability with shame. You know, Ash, what did you do the thing? You didn't do the thing. Well, get the thing done.
mm,
And that's much more of a shaming kind of conversation than a let's solve this problem kind of conversation.
mm,
And so that's the other aspect of where I think people really misinterpret what accountability is it's a conversation, and done well, it's a problem solving conversation, and making sure that even if we did get the thing done, were we doing the right thing? in the right time, in the right order.
Mm,
Just because we often in our world, especially with, urgent, 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 running all the time, everything instant delivery, barely hit, buy on your phone and it's at your doorstep kind of thing. We
yeah.
get caught in done is so important. But the right things done is important, but the wrong things done actually isn't that important.
Yeah, yeah. And all of us have exactly I mean, we are, no matter if you're born in Donald Trump's house or I don't know, Putin's house or in a small town in England, every single person has exactly same time in a day. There's no
Exactly.
difference at all, right? It's what matters is how you prioritize your stuff in your life. That is the key, isn't it?
It is. It is. And the reality for us is most everybody has heard of what's called the Eisenhower matrix, which is the important on one side and urgent, on another matrices, right? And so everybody gets the important and urgent stuff done.
Mm,
We do. The deadline hits, it's easy to do because we know it has to be done. But what happens for so many of us is because we get in that urgent mode, we actually spend time in the urgent but not important quadrant
mm,
instead of taking that time that you're talking about that we have a limited amount of and energy, um, and putting it to the important and not urgent
mm,
category, right? And that's where accountability really comes in, is to help people move away from urgent and not important and instead put time and energy up into the important and not urgent. Because if we can get things solved in the important and not urgent quadrant, that means we're doing it proactively, not reactively. It means that things often don't ever land into the urgent and important category because they're done before they become urgent. And so that's the place where I think a lot of us are losing effectiveness within our own lives and businesses, is that we get too focused on the urgent side.
mm.
And after we've done the important, we're still doing the urgent, but now it's the not important piece.
And that is a very important aspect of being a solo founder. Plus, even if you're not a solo founder, just a founder, because you see, the example you have shared in this story when we started, right? If we actually, because, numbers are easy for founders to understand, right?
Well,
If we,
yeah, well, everyone
yeah,
loves numbers because they're very
everyone,
tangible.
yeah. So, like I was just thinking that, like, how you can plot these numbers, you know, for calculating. So let's say like what's the hidden cost of avoiding accountability as a founder? What was the cost for the person you have helped in this story if she would have not been accountable? And if you could show that cost, like she started with 6 figures and now she's heading towards the 8 figures, right? If you would have said, oh, it's costing you 8 figures, that would have blown her mind, right?
Right, right. And that's the thing, is that we think we don't wanna be held accountable because we think it's micromanagement, and
Mm,
especially when you're talking about visionaries and founders and, that category of people, they really don't like micromanagement.
mm.
Being micromanaged is so anti their,
Yeah, and
their
that's why they're
mojo.
leaders. Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
yeah, exactly. It's why they're founders, it's why they're visionaries, right? Um,
yeah.
but accountability really is not micromanagement. It is just about asking hard questions and doing problem solving on the things that are actually important. And sometimes that will feel momentarily like micromanagement because we're asking a lot of questions and we're getting down into the weeds of things. But it's
Mm,
only so that we can figure out what's down here in the weeds and then pull back up to be able to say, okay, now we know what needs to be solved.
got it, got it. And Gwen, there is a very popular saying in the productivity vertical, especially in the founders space, where we have heard this, that it's not about motivation, it's about discipline. This, how does this popular idea of discipline differs from genuine accountability?
Well, so here a lot of people will say, "Well, I'm very self-accountable." And my
Mm,
first answer is, "Well, you can't actually be self-accountable. That goes against the definition." What it probably means is you're disciplined, right?
mm,
Or you're responsible or you're reliable. All of those things, super awesome things. We need to be that. There's no negativity in any
yeah.
of those things. But accountability, true accountability, is actually a conversation. It is a two-way street. And it takes someone else to be in conversation with you and to be in that reflection process.
Mm,
And so being disciplined is fabulous. Zero issue with being disciplined. And I will say, this particular person, when she was young, she was on track to be an Olympic competitor until she blew out her knee. Okay, so like she was really, really close to being in the Olympics. Anyone who's an Olympic competitor has a lot of discipline, right?
definitely.
They're
Yeah.
doing all the things that have to be done. So she is a perfect example. She has a ton of discipline, and reliability and responsive. Like she is so high there. But
Mm,
the reflective process back and forth, you just can't do yourself. One of the phrases that gets used a lot in the circles that I travel in, and I wish I could remember the gentleman's name. His first name is Tim. I'm not going to remember his last name, but you can't read the label inside the jar, right?
mm,
And that's part of what accountability is someone else looking and saying, "Does this actually make sense? I know it feels like it makes sense because you're in your space and you've got all of these thoughts and whatnot. But what if we what if we step away for a little bit and someone else is looking and saying, "Yeah, that looks good from where you are, but that's actually not good. That's not what you want to be doing."
mm, mm. That is so eye opening because let me share with you my story. So when I was raising for my first startup, um, I started building the product for 6 months. We kept working on it and we kept like spreading the word, like build in public everything. But we never actually created the pitch deck. And we were raising. Can you imagine that? We used to reach out to VCs and everything. And then I went back to Oxford. I have the alumni group there, and I met someone there who was a student in that current year, MBA student, and I was just there, talking in an event and everything, and then he said that he was very younger than me, but then he said, "Why don't you give this piece to me? I will do the pitch deck for you." And you can go ahead. Say, no, 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 no. You don't understand my product. I understand my product and services inside out. I know what to write. So he asked me a question. Why haven't you written the pitch deck then? Why haven't you created it? You've been doing so good job with your product and it's similar. And I'm like, that's a very good question because I've never asked this. That day, we made a pact. We created a WhatsApp group. He, me, and one of my mentors, we joined that group, and then in that group it said, you are the people who are going to ask me, have I done these things or not? I'm going to give you the timeline as per my availability, and you're responsible to make sure that I'm accountable to it. Said that, I have not just raised, the company is working. We are a very small team, but it is going on. So you see the switch, just involving few people into the loop and having, they're not somebody whom I report to. They're not somebody whom I have to, address any kind of problem or solution. They're just there asking me question. Ash, have you done it?
Yeah. And that's the thing. It needs good accountability requires someone else who will be there in your corner. One of the phrases that I use often is, I am a highly interested, disinterested party.
Hmm,
So I don't have any skin in the game. I'm not taking percentages. It's what someone said, you should take percentages of these companies. And it's like, no, because that will change my motivation. And all of a sudden I am inside the jar.
hmm,
Right. And so it's like, nope, I'm staying outside the jar. I'm not coming inside the jar. And so but it is that outside perspective, right? It's that piece coming in. But part of it is they have to care enough that they're doing their half of the accountability, right? One of the things that we find often is new founders, especially solopreneurs, will get in environments where they've got 3 or 4 or 5, we're all gonna be an accountability group together, but they aren't actually dedicated.
Mm.
So, "Oh, I can't make it this week. Oh, I've got a sales call. Oh, I've got a this. Oh, I've got a that." And what we find then is all of a sudden it starts falling apart because they aren't absolutely dedicated. Now, that being said, I've also been in groups where you've got, 4 or 5 or 6 people that are in an accountability group, and they are dedicated. That time is blocked. They make sure that they're available to the other people, that that they're following up, um, and that the other, it's happening in both directions. But it's why a lot of times people will hire someone like me as an outside person because now my job is to hold you accountable. That is
Definitely.
that is the piece, and so
Yeah.
I'm going to do it. I had someone say, "You hardly ever change appointments on us," and it was a client, and I kind of looked at them because I have someone says like, "You do things
Why do
differently."
you
I was
want
like,
that? Yeah.
yeah, it was like and I was like, what do you mean? Of course I don't change, my appointments. You've committed the time, I've committed the time." And they're
Mm,
like, "Oh, yeah, no, I've worked with a lot of other folks that it's like, 'Oh, can we change? Can we change here? Can we change here?'" And it's like, "Mm, that's not
mm,
something I'm gonna do because that's my commitment." Do I
mm,
occasionally I have an emergency come up, we need to change an appointment. But that's a rarity because that's part of my commitment and my accountability to you is that I'm gonna
mm,
show up.
mm. And in founders' life, especially solo founders' life, it happens quite often that they have to continuously postpone thing, even though they would move the business forward as it is. Their day-to-day jobs, there are many day-to-day tasks that just disappear without producing anything measurable, right? And if somebody asks you like, can you write down your top three priorities, they might not be able to do that. This could happen in a lot of cases. What process or what framework do you advise to our listeners today to sort of utilize in order to get their priorities in line and have somebody available for them so that they can be assured the accountability?
So, there's a couple things. I believe this quote is attributed to Bill Gates that people overestimate what they can get done in a year and they underestimate what they can get done in 10 years.
Mm,
Um, what I have found is people actually underestimate what they can get done in a year, by a lot. And so what we do is we encourage people to be looking a quarter at a time because 90 days is actually a really long time for getting significant things done, but not so long that we're waiting until, November, October to actually start the thing, right?
mm,
And then we also encourage folks to be looking at their progress week to week because the other thing I think we get caught in, we're recording right now during kind of at the beginning of the holiday season in the United States. We've got Thanksgiving coming up, and then we've got all of the holidays through the December and whatnot. And people forget it's like, okay, this week is pretty well lost. This week's pretty well lost. This week the family's coming in, and although technically I'm working, it's not going to happen. All of those things. So part of what we encourage is that you're looking at week to week, and
mm,
each week you're saying, what is the one and at most 3, I mean, really taking it down to the 1 or at most 3 things that really must get done in moving the needle, not in the things that you're gonna do every week. So, like, it's never on my list that I'm gonna show up for a client meeting because 'cause I'm
mm,
always gonna show up for a client meeting, right? But if I need to send out a set of emails promoting a new product, that might be on my list because I could see that getting pushed and
mm,
pushed and pushed, right? So what are the things that's moving the needle on my business that's actually doing that? And part of how we define that, because yet, like you said, the priority piece is really important. And, priority really means one. It only became plural fairly recently. Priority really is supposed to be a singular because you can't have multiple priorities. There is
Mm.
one priority, and then there is a second level after
Priority.
that,
Mm.
and so on, right? But one of the things that we also encourage people to think about is, what does success actually mean to us? Right? So, when we started the session, we talked about someone, really growing and scaling their business. And I knew for her that was what success truly, truly meant. There's all sorts of things in her life and her history and everything else that that completely aligns with her. But that may not be success for everybody.
Mm.
Sometimes success is being able to make sure that I go to every soccer game that my kids are having,
Mm.
right? And so part of this is saying, what does success really look like for me right now? Because that's the other thing. It could change
Mm.
in a year or two or three, right? This is not forever. It's right now. What does success look like? And what is the one, like I said, at most three things I'm going to do this week to get me closer to that,
Mm.
right? And that's the thing you wanna have held accountable. So, your example that you were talking about, like, why don't you have a pitch deck, which which I love, right, is what was the one thing that was gonna get you closer to getting your funding?
Mm.
Well, a pitch deck was one of those things,
Yeah.
right? That needed to be the priority. Having 1,000 more meetings without a pitch deck might,
Doesn't
but
gonna work. Yeah.
probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not, right? What's the next most important thing that I can be doing, to my definition of success, whatever that happens to be?
Mm. No, definitely. And you touched a very good point there that if you have your priorities set for the week, then you're focused for that week. And then, it, it, it- I've learned this in my commercial career also for 15 years in the industry that when you're planning larger projects, a year, 2 years, 3 years, multi-million dollar projects, it is very hard to project things. It's very hard to sort of like understand how they are going to be for the longer term in terms of forecasting, right? You can forecast numbers because you have a budget. You can forecast resources, but you cannot actually forecast how the overall project is going to go because things change while you're progressing. But the more shorter projects you're planning, the more easier it gets because you know exactly what you have to deliver in that particular period of time. You know exactly what kind of value you will receive with it, and you know exactly how much you're spending. So your ROI is very clear. If we are taking that in account and understanding, like how should founders or solo founders proceed with their day-to-day activity, because we have understood, like if you plan your weeks, that is much better in terms of priorities and accountability. So how is there like a tool you use, or is there a sort of like, or maybe let me ask you this question in a way, would you be able to share a story of one of your clients who were not feeling in the place when he or she came to you for some help? And what kind of strategies, tool sets, frameworks you have provided him? I want to understand the nitty-gritties, the ins and outs, what you have done with that client of yours, so that our listeners can learn from it and potentially could be able to implement that for themselves.
So one of the things is first getting clear on what really, and it's one of those things, this sounds super simple,
Mm-hmm.
and technically it is, but it's not easy, is being really clear on what is your definition of success. Because what I've come across with multiple of my founders is they have gotten caught in to what social media is defining as
Mm,
success. If I don't
mm,
have a seven-figure business, I'm not successful. It's
mm,
like, maybe, maybe not. Depends on what your actual goals are. If you're wanting to have a team and all sorts of things, then you probably are gonna have a bigger business. But if it's about how much freedom you have and flexibility you have and how much money you have in your pocket, a seven-figure business may not be as wonderful as you think it is. So
Yeah.
taking the time first, and this is one of the things that we do with our clients when they come in, is to try and get really clear on what does success actually mean. And,
Mm,
this is something you can do with yourself. You can journal, you can spend some time, but it's not a, 2-minute exercise.
mm,
Most people, when we really get down to it, have a hard time defining what success really means to them. That's the first thing, because that's going to drive the priorities and the alignment. So that's absolutely the first thing that they
clarity.
need to do.
Yeah.
Um, and many times what we've discovered in working, I've got w- probably half of my clients, when we first define that, they define it closer to what I'm going to call a social media definition. And
Mhm.
if we work together over a year, then we'll go through we do the same process every year. And at the year mark, they're like, yeah, this isn't at all what I actually want. Because they've been paying way more attention to what do I want. So that's the first thing, is getting the noise out of our head and really saying what actually matters to me, not what I'm supposed to want, not what I should want. I use the phrase, don't should all over yourself. We don't want to should all over ourselves all the time, right? But one of the next things that a, a particular client, she and I had worked together for a little while, and things were shifting. And that's the other thing, is to be aware when things are shifting for you. In her
Mm.
case, her son was about to enter grade school. Okay, so
Okay.
she had a little one at home, and he was about to enter grade school. She also had a physical publishing business. Okay, so she was publishing a magazine. It was a very curated, very narrow niche, focus magazine, but it was printed.
Mm.
And what she was realizing was the effort that it took and the return that it made wasn't actually doing what she wanted it to do. And so we spent some time, and I encouraged her to look at, where really is your profitability? Is your profitability where you really want it to be?
Mm.
Is this the thing that's making you happy, or is this the thing that you've been doing, right? And it was her dream to create this magazine, and part of mine is like, are you holding on to a dream that's no longer your dream now,
Mm. Because the
right?
dreams could change. Yeah.
Dreams can change, right?
Yeah.
And so what ended up happening is she actually decided to close down the magazine.
Okay.
And because she was working at it from a reflection standpoint, she was able to do it in a way that brought her all sorts of peace. Like, it took effort. I'm not going to say it didn't, that it didn't take effort, because of course it took effort. And it wasn't like, oh, this is all lovely. I mean, like, there's like, oh, I hate doing this, because it too was her child of,
Mm.
creating this. But because she was constantly reflecting on it and not assuming that today's answer is tomorrow's answer, she was able to actually make new decisions, and she was able to close down, over a period of time, let all of her subscribers know that this is what was happening, and completely shut down that business, which then created an opportunity for her to do something completely different, which now in this season of life is more
Mm.
aligned with where she is now with her son starting school.
That
And
takes us back to the first point, isn't it? Clarity. If you do not have the clarity which direction you want to go, you might be going in a direction which would be totally a waste of your time.
I had another client who came to me and she said, I'm so close to breaking 1,000,000, but I just can't seem to do it. And I've got to do it. I've got to do it. And my question to her was, do you? Why?
Mm. Why do you have to?
And
You just need that extra zero
yeah, it was like, what
added.
what and she was in high six figures. I can't remember her
Mm.
exact number, but I mean, it was like she was like at 800,000 or 800. I mean, like,
Mm.
it wasn't like she was, like at 100,000. I mean, she was close to that. But she was basically a solo founder. So she was putting a ton of that money
Mm.
into her pocket. And I said, "So why do you need to be bigger?" And she's like, "Well, because I'm in this group and they say that, you've gotta be 7 figures." And it was like, "Why? What's the deal?"
Social
And so
stigma.
yeah, exactly. It was totally about social stigma. And so we started talking about what will that take? And what that was gonna take is actually bringing on team members. She had, like, a couple very part-time people. It was like, "That's
Mm.
gonna require you to bring on team members."
Yeah, yeah.
And she's like, "Oh, I don't actually wanna have team members." And I said, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's true." Like, everything that we've talked about, that's not actually what you want in your life, right?
Mm.
And so back to, all of these examples are taking time to actually reflect and not just go with what I'm gonna call the obvious answer,
Mm.
is the obvious answer. And so that's the thing that any founder can do is at any point in time say, "Is this really what I want?
Mm.
Is this really what I want?" And so the process that we use with our clients is a mini journaling exercise every week. And I developed it because it was something that I would do for myself, and it would be something, I was a solopreneur for a very, very long time. Um, and so it would be something that I would encourage folks to do, which is have an end of week reflection process, okay? That
Okay.
really is about, and I ask myself 5 questions, and and they're fairly simple. Um, what do I need to stop doing? What's not working for me? What do
Mm.
I need to do less of? What's really working and I need to continue? What's
Mm.
something I tried and I need to do more of? And what's the thing I need to start doing?
Mm. Indeed. If you have if you have clarity about all these things, then you're almost above the 90% of the people who are working with you anyways. Like, how many people actually have clarity of all these things, right?
Well, and, I'd love to say I nail it all the time. That would not be true. I do not nail it all the time. No one does. But being able to have that journaling reflection process and being able to go back week to week to week and see where am I making progress, where am I not? And then
Mm.
the places where I'm not, back to the reflection question of what's preventing me from doing that,
Mm.
right?
Indeed.
Is it an outside, situation that maybe I don't have as much control over? Is it an internal, mental situation? Is it just a behavior situation that I need to change? Um, you know, it allows us to start asking the question. And to me, this is the definition of accountability is to be having those questions. And like I said, I do this for myself, but I also have someone who's part of my team that is holding me accountable, that I'm
Indeed.
having these same reflection processes with.
Indeed. And this is brilliant, Gwen, because now I'm getting into more deeper understanding of being a founder is not just about getting yourself together, but also the process, the systems around you, the environment around you, so that other people can get inspired, or not just get inspired. They when they start using the similar kind of process, obviously your team gets more productive, right? What what one metric you avoid, or one metric do you track, even though when you knew it would not improve so okay, two parts. What one metric you shouldn't be bothered about, and what one metric you should be tracking all the time in order to understand how your performance is going on?
So one of the metrics that I've been tracking for a long time, and and it's not an intuitive one, so it's not on anyone's dashboard. Most of the time is how consistently am I doing my own reflection process every week?
Got it.
Okay.
Own
Because
reflection.
I've been traveling a lot and doing a whole bunch of things, and sometimes it drops off. It just doesn't work because I'm in the middle of things, right? And if that drops off for too long, then it becomes the habit of not doing it, right? And so that's a metric that I have tracked I can't even tell you how long that I've
Mm,
tracked it. And I know that it's not gonna be 100%, but I pay close attention to, am I taking time to reflect on my week and what's been happening. So that's the number one metric that isn't normally tracked. One that often is tracked, but I think it's tracked um, poorly. I'll use that as a phrase. Not one I don't think that you shouldn't track, but but I think you have to track it carefully, is
mm,
income, right? It's an easy one for everyone to track. How how much have you made in sales, right? But this goes back to the earlier client I was talking about, who was making, I don't know, 700, 800,000, and was, like, feeling like they were failing. I was like, "You are not failing." In any definition of the word, because they had gotten caught in the income number. What
mm,
was different for her, and most people didn't understand, is her profit number that came out the other end of that was huge. I think she was probably running at a 60 to 70% profit margin on that number. And I mean after everything else is everything else is paid, right?
mm,
And so we get caught on the income number because it's the easy number. We don't have to, take out, cost of goods if we're selling physical product. We don't have to take out labor if we're manufacturing something. We don't have to take out all the expenses. We don't have to, do all of those things. But I think the biggest metric that gets abused, and that's really I think the term I want to use is abused, is we get too focused just on the income number and not enough of the other numbers that play into what the whole story is. I know lots of people who make $1 million who aren't paying themselves.
mm,
Their business
mm.
has $1 million in it, but they're not paying themselves.
Yeah, and it all comes in around how you manage your numbers, and what I was reading, Profit First, the
Oh,
famous
I
book.
love
That's
Profit First and Mike
amazing,
Michalowicz. I
right?
used to be a Profit First professional. I love that whole process. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, oh my God, this is so basic, but it's so effective, for a founder. Going into the similar direction, then, what kind of external accountability could genuinely help you? For example, is it just regular check-ins? Is it just shared goals? Is it just public commitment? Like, what is that you suggest our founders to seek for being more accountable?
Yeah, I really I suggest that they find what I'm gonna call a true accountability partner.
Mm,
Um, and one of the things about accountability partner, I've got a couple things that usually have to be in place. There's always exceptions, but usually this needs to be in place. First, they can't be someone that is close to you, like a husband or a child or a spouse, or any of those kind of things,
mm,
because they have their own needs that are going to be driving the process, right?
mm,
They're not quite distant enough. Could be a close friend. And it could be it's great if it's another business owner.
mm,
Could be a coach or a consultant or a paid person, but having an accountability partner that you're interacting with in some form or fashion every week,
mm,
because a lot can happen in a week. And I've had people's like, "Oh, well, we only touch base once a month." And it's like, 30 a lot can happen in 30 days. You can get way off track in
mm,
30 days. So although I don't meet with all of my clients weekly, I meet with some of them weekly, but I do have an accountability check-in that I do with my clients every week. Because and sometimes the check-in is gonna be, "I'm taking vacation next week, I'm not checking in." Okay, that's great. I've got no issue with that.
yeah.
Vacation's important, and I want you to do that too, right? But having a true accountability partner, and if it's not a paid person, someone that is as committed as you are, so that
Mm,
you can be that for them as well, right? So that you're both checking in on a consistent basis, um, and that you're able to ask the questions and provide the insights that the other needs. right?
Got it.
And so that they're able to help you, which means sometimes you'll have what I call an accountability partner for a season.
Hmm.
Okay. They've got a specific set of skills and they need you for a specific set of time. And so it may not be forever. I know some accountability relationships that go on for years and years, and I know some that go on for, 3, 6 months
Yeah.
because it gets them to where they need to be. One is not better than the other. It's about,
Other.
is it the right answer for it, right? But finding who that accountability partner is that's committed, and that will support you, in your goals, not put their goals on you, right? Not project their goals on you. So if I want to have a $10 million business, but you want to have a really healthy $700,000 business, I need to not be projecting my
Hmm.
growth onto you.
Hmm. Very interesting. Very interesting. I mean, Gwen, this conversation is going on so well. I could like talk to you the whole night. But unfortunately, we're just heading towards the end of our episode. And I do have the quick fire round ready, which is like 6 quick fire questions for you. At any point, if you think that you don't want to answer any question, just give me a skip and then we can move to the next one.
Okay,
Is that okay? Okay.
I'm
Great
good.
stuff. Great. What are the top 3 strategies to keep your business in line in 2026?
Um, Being aligned with yourself,
Hmm.
having an accountability system in place that works, and not getting caught in all of the noise, and I mean all of the media noise that's going on.
Mm. That is very, very important because that just distracts you a lot, right? Great. What book would you recommend to our audience and why?
Profit first.
Profit first.
Pro Profit First, if you haven't read it, is a great book for, really getting your finances in place. I'm gonna give you 2 books. If you've already got Profit First, my other book that I absolutely love is called Thinking in Bets, Bets.
Thinking
It's
in
written by
bets.
Annie
Okay.
Duke, and,
Hmm.
she's a former poker professional, and it
Mm,
makes you think about decision making completely differently.
perfect. I'm going to add that into my reading list. Right now, I'm in on E-Myth. So, it's just a trajectory. You read step
Yep,
by step, right? So I'm going to add that. So thinking in bets, I'm going to add that into my reading list. What one attribute or characteristic in your mind of a successful founder?
persistence.
Persistence.
Yeah,
Grit.
because
Yeah.
because it's gonna take there's times it's gonna go really well, and there's times that you're just gonna have to get through it.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. What's your favorite personal productivity tool or habit?
It really is my own planning system. I actually created my own planner. I print it
Mm,
out. And it's so it works for me. It takes
mm,
lots of things from a thousand other other systems, but it's a system that works for me. So and in my case, it's a written system. I still do a whole lot of stuff electronically,
mm.
but it's a combination of both. And so for me, it's about figuring out that system that works for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. What's a new or a crazy business idea you would love to pursue if you had time?
Gosh, crazy business idea. I would actually love to come up with a really interesting product or really interesting manufacturing thing to do. I have no idea
Mm.
what it is, so that's why I'm not giving you any specifics, but I would love to be like, lightning bolted with with one of those things at
With
some
the
point,
manufacturing. Yeah.
um, just just because I think it would be an interesting business to develop.
Got it. And last but not least, what's an interesting or fun fact about you that most people don't know?
If you read enough history, people know about it, but, I used to be a professional knitting instructor. I taught knitting
Wow.
all over the world.
Wow. That's
So
amazing.
it's not completely unknown because I did it for quite a while and, depending on what histories you read and whatnot, it shows up. But yeah, I used to teach knitting. That was one of the many unusual jobs.
Well,
I've
we
done.
have a knitting champion on our show now. You know, that's the verticals are growing. So that's amazing. Hey, Gwen, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your, wisdom. If people want to check out or people want to get in touch with you, people want to understand your journaling system, what's the best way to do it?
So the easiest way is to reach out to me at my website, which is everydayeffectiveness.com. And if anything, if someone's like, "Oh my gosh, I feel like I need to ask a question," we have a clarity call button and no charge, no sales, just like let's see if I can help. And happy to have someone schedule a clarity call.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your inspiring journey and the impactful work you're doing. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on
It
Founders
has been a
Podcast.
delight to be on with you as well, Ash. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Great stuff.